So today in class we didn't get to go over assignment 2 at all, but part 1 is to create a stacked wall, which is what you see in section here, where we have a concrete base wall that goes about 3 foot 6 inches tall, and then on top of that we have a light wood frame construction wall. And so we've experimented with the wall tool, and we've created layers, and we've made a custom wall type. But now, how do we make a wall that does this? So part 1 of homework assignment 2 is to create a stacked wall, which is what that type of wall is called in Revit. So I'm going to create a new architectural template, and I'm going to select the wall tool, and I'm going to start with a 6-inch generic wall. Now I'm not going to draw anything, but I want to edit the type of this wall, and I want to start with my generic template, and I'm going to duplicate it and call it stacked wall top, and click OK. I'm going to edit the structure just like we've done in previous assignments. I'm going to insert 3 layers. I'm going to move 2 layers up and 1 layer down, 2 layers above the core boundary and 1 layer below the core boundary. I'm going to change their function. And I'm going to change their thickness. I'm going to do 5/8 inch, 5/8 inch, and 1 inch. I'm going to apply materials to this as well. So this outer layer is lap siding. You'll notice that I don't have any lap siding in my project, but I do have them in the material library. So I'm going to grab one and drop it in. And I'm going to change my surface pattern to, and I'm going to select model pattern type. I'm going to make it a 6-inch parallel pattern. Say OK. And my cut plane, my cut pattern right now sorry about that. Let's try lap siding again. It's right here. And my surface pattern, I'm going to do model pattern type, and I'm going to make a 6-inch parallel lines. And my cut pattern, I'm going to change to diagonal up small. Let's go large. Diagonal up regular. Say OK and OK. If I scroll in, you can start to see it's kind of resembling siding right now. And we're going to change the substrate layer to being plywood. And I'm going to make that a cut pattern, its cut pattern look like plywood. Say OK and OK. And I'm going to leave my structure with no category at the moment. Again, I'm going to change my finish 2 pattern to be gypsum wallboard. Say OK. And so now we're starting to have the same pattern that looks like this here, where we've got our lap siding, our 5-inch drywall. We'll put in our insulation after we finish the wall type, and then our gypsum wallboard. I'm going to say OK, OK again, And so now I have this wall type here, stacked wall top. Now I want to create the concrete wall type. This one, this 8-inch concrete with 5/8 inch gypsum wallboard on the interior and a field stone on the exterior. So we're going to select our generic 8-inch wall, and we're going to edit its type as well. And we're going to duplicate it and rename it stacked wall bottom. BOT for bottom. Say OK. And now we're going to insert 3 layers. We're going to move 2 of them up and 1 of them down. I'm going to change the function finish 1, substrate, structure, finish 2. And we're going to put in a dimension of 5/8. This is going to stay 8 inches. And we have a 1/8 inch mortar set. And now we have a 2-inch field stone. And we can scroll in and see that we do indeed have those layers. It's a little hard to read. So if I press OK and OK, I can change the thin lines. I can select that and go back to my basic wall type, stacked wall bottom. And now I can start to see that 1/8 inch gap there because we're not showing our cut lines. Let's edit the structure and let's change the materials. So we're going to go ahead and type in fieldstone, and note that the fieldstone doesn't come up in our project. So we have to bring one in. We can select that guy. And notice again there's no cut pattern or surface pattern. So let's change that cut pattern to be diagonal cross hatching. And our surface pattern, we don't really have anything in here at the moment that looks like cut stone. And if we go to our model lines, our model pattern type, we don't really have a material as well that is cut stone. Okay, so there isn't a drafting pattern type surface pattern that looks like fieldstone. And if you switch to the pattern type model based, you'll notice we don't really have one for fieldstone either. So we can just kind of go ahead and use maybe the brick surface pattern at the moment. Next week we will be learning how to create custom curtain pattern or custom pattern types. But today let's just focus on working on the stacked wall. Let's press OK and OK again, and we scroll in and we start to see that we're defining these layers. So let's create a material for our mortar set. And if we type in mortar set, nothing comes up because a material doesn't necessarily exist for that. But we can create a new material by clicking on this plus with a circle with a plus on it down here in the lower left hand corner of the dialog box, and we can create a new material. If we hover over the text and right click, we can rename this material mortar set. And now that we have it named, we can put a cut pattern to it. And let's go small diagonal up. And we don't need to create a surface pattern for it. We just want the cut pattern so we can see it. Say OK. And now we haven't been defining a material for structure, but we're going to go ahead and do that now. And we're going to type in concrete. And let's use the precast concrete. And we don't really need a surface pattern, so I'm going to just say no pattern. But we do want a concrete pattern. I'm going to say OK. And now we also want to define our gypsum wallboard. So now you can start to see we have the pattern that's similar to this pattern here. Say OK, OK. And you're wondering where I'm probably going with this, but once we've created these two wall types, we can now use what's called a stacked wall. We can select the stacked wall, and if you draw the one that's predefined here, escape out of that, go into 3D, you can see that it's a fairly basic generic wall type that they give us. That actually doesn't help us very much by switching to realistic mode. But you can see that there are two different types of walls here. Well, if we select this and edit its type, there's not a whole lot we can do in here except edit the structure. And when you open this up, it looks similar to the edit wall structure, except now we're editing the top of the wall and the base of the wall. And so under the name tab, we can select a down arrow, which allows us to scroll down and pick our stacked wall as a top. And we can pick for the bottom one our stacked wall that we made for the bottom. You can see that they're not quite lining up the way that we want. We want both the top wall gypsum and the bottom wall gypsum to line up with each other. So we can change the offset to being the finished face of the interior, and you can see that that shifts my my walls to be aligned based on the interior side of the wall. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, you'll notice now our new wall type is sitting here, but we don't have that precast sill plate in there, this guy. And so what we can do is we can go ahead and tab through until we get the bottom of this stacked wall selected. And it's grayed out, we can't change it, but we can edit it. Similar to creating a reveal, we can now create a wall sweep. And I'm going to change my sample height to being 3 feet so that we're not dealing with looking at 20 feet of wall. And I'm going to select in my modify vertical structure, I'm going to select the sweep tab, and that allows us to add a sweep profile instead of a reveal profile. And so instead of cutting into the wall, we're adding an element to the wall. And so just like our profile for our reveal, we can select a customized profile. Now Revit comes with a standard sill precast 5-inch precast sill plate, and so we don't have to make a custom one, but we could if we wanted to. And so if I hit apply, you'll see it pops in here down at the bottom of the wall. We don't want it at the bottom of the wall, we want it at the top of the wall. So this is saying that it's sitting at the base. We can click that, the down arrow there, and change it to the top and hit apply. Hit OK, and OK, and OK. You can see now that that sill plate is taking up that awkward space between the two walls. We go to our level 1 view and scroll in. In our quick command line here up here, we can click this button called section, and we can go ahead and draw a section by clicking once, dragging, and clicking again to finish the command. We can cut a section through the wall itself. And if you look here now in the project browser, we have a section tab. We can go ahead and open that up, and it's starting to kind of look like this a little bit, but it's not quite there yet. So one, we want to change the top constraint of the wall to being level 2, so we're not dealing with a ton of extra wall. And this section, we can drag these little blue things down to just get what we want to see. So we can even maybe hide the rest of that wall type there. And it's still not quite looking the same, right? So let's go ahead and change this to being fine. And now you can start to see our layers of our wall, but the hatch patterns are pretty far off. So we're going to go ahead and change our scale to 1.5 inches equals a foot. And now you can see, we can start to see all of our layers in our wall, and they're starting to look fairly similar to what's going on here. And if I turn on my cut lines, you'll see it's now really starting to look the same or very similar. Right? We're just drawing it backwards. So in order to remedy that, to make it definitely look the same, we can flip the exterior wall to the lower side here and go back to our section, and now it's looking pretty similar. The only difference is that we're missing this bad insulation, we're missing this break line here, and we're also missing this 2D sill plate or floor plate of the wall itself. And then if you look really closely, you'll see that this guy is also cutting into our plywood. And so just to figure out how much it is cutting in, I switch my viewport to 1:1. I'm going to use the measure tool and measure this, and it's about 1/8 of an inch. And it's not really where we want it to be. So now that we're in the section, we can tab through and select the lower half of the wall, and again edit it. and edit the sweep. And there's a distance offset, and then there's an offset. Distance is height. So if we put in 1 foot, it gives me a warning because the wall sweep is now a foot above this 3-foot sample wall, and it doesn't like that. So we need to change that back to 0. But we can offset it by 1/8 of an inch and hit apply. And if we hit OK and OK, you'll see now that our sill plate is sitting flush up against the plywood. And the other thing that we've got going on is that our siding right now is cutting into the plywood itself, or cutting into the sill plate itself. And we don't really want to show that, but there's not really a good way at the moment to change it, because we could select this wall type and edit it, and typically you can modify this edge and unlock it, say OK and OK, but you can't select it. Typically in a section, when you cut a section through there, we're just going to do this for a sample. We'll go back to level 1 and we'll create just a single wall. Whoops. Let's Control Z that. I'm going to create a new wall. And I'm going to just create a stacked wall, the top part of the wall. And I'm going to cut a section through that. And then I'm going to go to section 2. Change it to 1:1. Change my my detail to fine. And if I select it, you'll notice I have these pull down arrows here. So in theory, I can start manipulating this. Say I had a rim joist here that sits here, and then a sill plate and a foundation wall, and we wanted our siding to come down past the rim joist and sit on the foundation. We could do that, right? It allows us to do that. However, when you're in a stacked wall, it doesn't allow you to do that. So we have to go to our annotation tab and create a filled region. And we probably should have given this a category of a material and called it concrete 2 as well. So that when we look at it, it looks like concrete. But we're going to go to our filled region. Yeah, our filled region. And we're basically going to hide this line. Okay? So that, let's zoom in on this a little bit. So that it starts to look more like this. Okay? And so we're in the filled region command. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a rectangle here. And I'm going to move him, let's move him to there. And we'll make this line invisible. And Yeah. We'll make this line invisible as well. I think this will do it. And so we can again select what type of filled region or pattern we want. Well, we don't have one that says concrete, so we can edit this type. We can duplicate it, and call it concrete. Say OK, and now we can change the fill pattern similarly to how we manipulate the material cut pattern, and we can make it a fill pattern that looks like concrete. OK. Press the check button, and now this thing is starting to look a lot closer to what we want. And let's change it back to 1 inch, 1/2 inch equals a foot, and looks a little funky here. So what I'm going to do is create a detailed line, and I'm going to make it probably a medium line, and I'm just going to draw this in here. And that didn't quite do it for me, so I'm going to make it a wide line. And now we're starting to look pretty close to what we need to have here. And it still doesn't quite look right in this area, so we can select this guy and edit its boundary. And let's just go ahead and make 2 lines here, and I'm going to trim this line to this line and this line to this line, and I'm going to make those 2 lines that I just created invisible. Now that's starting to look pretty close to this right here. So that's awesome. Now, in order to get a couple of these other elements in here, so 1 is our break line, 2 is our bad insulation, and then the 3rd is this representation of a cutting through a 2x6. We can, in our annotation tab, select insulation, and we know we have a 6-inch wall, so let's make this 5.5 inches. Didn't like that. 5.5 inches, and select the center point of the wall, and we can start drawing insulation in. But now we want a 2x6 here without having to draw detail lines. Alright, we could draw the detail lines, set the line weights to look close to this, but I'd rather just kind of place an object instead of having to draw all that line work. So I'm going to go to the components in my annotation tab, and right off the bat it gives me 1 or 2 components that I could place. But what we really want to do is load a new family. And if we go to our view here and list it as a list, we have this item called detail items. If we open that up and go down to our Division 6 wood and plastics, we can select wood framing, and now we have a nominal cut lumber section, nominal cut lumber side, top, rough cut lumber section, rough cut side, and rough cut top. Let's just pick the rough cut lumber section and click open. It's going to ask you, what one do you want? Well, we know we want a 2x6 because that's the size of our wall. And we say OK. And now we have an element that's already pre-made, and by hitting the space bar we can flip it on its side and place it. So now we have a rough cut piece of lumber that looks pretty much like a standard detail, right? Except for we want to put a break line in here. So again, we want to go to our component and load a family in. We go back to our detail items, and in the Division 1 General we have a break line. So we can open that up and we can place it. And now we have a break line. We can move it down and we can pull this thing up and do pretty much whatever we want. And then we can dimension it. So we can go dimension from here to here, and that's 3 feet. Edit the witness line, and we can dimension to our break line as well. Oh, let's zoom out just a little bit so we can see this. And you notice ours is 3 feet tall, and we want this to say variable. So what we can do is we can select our wall type, edit it, edit the structure, and this bottom wall we can say we want that at 3 feet 6 inches and say OK and OK. Now it moved itself up, but it didn't move these elements. So we have to manually move these elements. You can see now this says 3'6", and we can drag our insulation up as well. Okay, so now that we've moved our detail items up to be back in line with everything, we can start to add in some text here. If we select our text, okay, so if we select our dimension line and click our text of the dimension line, we have a dialog box here that we can start to type in additional information. So below we can type 8-inch concrete wall. Now 8-inch, what's going on? 8-inch want the caps lock on. Concrete wall. Say OK.
It's
okay. So you can go ahead. I'm just getting flack from everybody here today in studio for making this video, but you can go ahead and edit this text as well to read 2x6 stud wall. Now you don't have to necessarily label all this stuff in your section of your wall, but it's just good to know how to do it. And this dimension actually needs to be replaced and say variable. And the last thing I want to show you is how to just create some text lines. So we want to go ahead and create a text line with a leader line. And we just click once, click twice, and a third time to create some text. And we're just going to name this 5/8 inch drywall. So go ahead and watch the roof type tutorial. It's on the assignment sheet, and you're going to want to create them in this same project that you created this particular stacked wall. And so go ahead and create all the different types of roofs that come up in the video, and use this stacked wall as your 4 walls for all the particular roofs. And keep this section somewhere off to the right or whatever. You can just right click it or left click it, drag, and move it off to the side so that it still exists and you don't lose that guy. Actually, don't do that. Go ahead and create the roofs off to the side over here somewhere and leave that guy centered. Okay, that's it for today, and we'll see you on Tuesday. We'll talk about some more complex roof shapes and get into some more fun stuff. But this is assignment 2, part 1, wall types, stacked wall, and then also you want to be creating part 2 for assignment 2, which is the roof types. And again, you can get the link to the video tutorials for those roofs on assignment 2 worksheet down at the bottom of the screen. So go ahead and save this as a project and call it roof underscore wall underscore types underscore last name, and save it. And then once you're done with wall part 1 and part 2, save it and upload it to Blackboard by next Thursday.